Welcome, friends. This is A Course in Miracles, Palm Beach Study Group. This evening, we're on Chapter 12, Section 3, The Investment in Reality. In the book, it's in the text, page 220. I once asked you to sell all you have and give to the poor and follow me. This is what I meant. If you have no investment in anything in this world, you can teach the poor where their treasure is. The poor are merely those who have invested wrongly, and they are poor indeed. Because they are in need, it is given you to help them, since you are among them. Consider how perfectly your lesson would be learned if you were unwilling to share their poverty. For poverty is lack, and there is but one lack, since there is but one need. So here's one of the places in the Course where Jesus is explaining the Bible verse. And he says, I once asked, he's talking about the passage in the New Testament where it's reported that he said, sell all you have and give to the poor and follow me. And of course, people have interpreted that, being steeped in the ego, as something literally selling possessions, goods, forsaking money, give it all away to the poor, and just follow Jesus, as in like a religious cult, a monastery, a convent, what have you. Go up and live in a cave and forsake all material goods. But here, sentence 2 says, this is what I meant. If you have no investment in anything in this world, in other words, if you have no investment in ego, you can teach the poor being those who are still caught in ego, where their treasure is. The treasure is in spirit. So the poor, the people caught in ego, are merely those who have invested wrongly. They've invested in the ego world. And they are poor indeed, he says. But because they are in need, they're in need of spiritual enlightenment. It is given you to help them because you now are overcoming the ego. You're beginning to realize how to divest yourself of the ego, and because they are in need, it is given you to help them. So we can help them since you are among them. In other words, we're still living in the ego illusion, but mentally and spiritually, we're on the path of evolution and learning how to forsake the ego world and embrace the world of spirit. So we are still among them. We're still manifesting in an ego body. So consider how perfectly your lesson would be learned if you were unwilling to share their poverty. In other words, your lesson would be perfect if, while you're in the ego, you're unwilling to share ego mentality with them, but to think only spiritually. For poverty is lack, ego is lack, And there is but one lack, since there is but one need. There's only one ego, and the only one need is to be in spirit. Any questions, comments? Paragraph 2. Suppose a brother insists on having you do something you think you do not want to do. His very insistence should tell you that he believes salvation lies in it. If you insist on refusing and experience a quick response of opposition, you are believing that your salvation lies in not doing it. You then are making the same mistake he is, and are making his error real to both of you. Insistence means investment, and what you invest in is always related to your notion of salvation. The question is always twofold. First, what is to be saved? And second, how can it be saved? So I'm getting the feeling here that an insistence is like an ego trait. Whereas, Spirit is very patient. Spirit just offers himself, but Spirit doesn't force you. Spirit doesn't insist. Spirit says, here it is. It's yours for free. You can take it if you want it, but I'm not going to force you to take it. So we have to ask two questions. What is to be saved, and how can it be saved? So paragraph 3, whenever you become angry with a brother for whatever reason, you are believing that the ego is to be saved and to be saved by attack. If he attacks, you are agreeing with this belief. If you attack, you are reinforcing it. Remember that those who attack are poor. Their poverty asks for gifts, not for further impoverishment. You who could help them are surely acting destructively if you accept their poverty as yours. If you had not invested as they had, it would never occur to you to overlook their need. So remember, a few chapters back, or paragraphs, sections back, we were told that anything but a call for love is a call for help. And so that's reflected again in this paragraph. So if we buy into the anger of another, we're buying into the ego, and we're reinforcing that, especially if we respond in anger. So that's not going to help anybody, not you, not the other person. So don't impoverish yourself and others by buying into somebody's poverty. Anything other than an expression of love is a cry for help. And that's how we need to see our our brothers and sisters who are not acting out of love. Any questions, comments? Paragraph 4. Recognize what does not matter, and if your brothers ask you for something outrageous, do it because it does not matter. Refuse, and your opposition establishes that it does matter to you. It is only you, therefore, who have made the request outrageous, and every request of a brother is for you. Why would you insist in denying him? For to do so is to deny yourself and impoverish both. He is asking for salvation as you are. Poverty is of the ego and never of God. No outrageous request can be made of one who recognizes what is valuable and wants to accept nothing else. So I'm going to say that the outrageous thing that they're asking for is something that is not of love, i.e., everything else except love, which is the call for help. So that's the way I'm interpreting this. I don't know.
But
Yes.
John, then it says, refuse and your opposition establishes that it does not matter to you. It is every request of a brother is for you. So if I don't comply with this request that may be outrageous, it comes back to me as then therefore my showing ego because I'm resistant to it.
Yeah, I understand. That's why we have to be careful on how we're interpreting this and defining outrageous. So in other words, I ask you to kill somebody. Well, that's outrageous in the way we think of something. But if your response is
so there has to be a response in there, such as I feel like something like a pointing out of an experience that, say, me as the person that's being addressed in this outrageous matter. So I think I would need to somehow indulge in an experience where we would, I don't know, like I feel like I want to say we would be better off not doing this outrageous thing. And I still feel that's a form of denial. So that's not really, I don't know. I'm a little baffled by it.
And I understand because I am also.
Maybe it will, usually when these dilemmas happen, it shows up in the next couple of paragraphs. So
yes, it does. The only way I can interpret it that makes any sense is to say that any outrageous thing that a brother may ask, if we interpret that as a call for help,
okay,
and then if we refuse to see it as a call for help, then we're buying into it. So,
Okay.
so if someone asked me to kill somebody for them, I would need to interpret that as a call for help and respond to them in such a way that I would try to counsel them and ask them to talk it out and explain to me, what the problem is or what have you, and try to counsel them spiritually to respond in a loving way. Not that I would say, "Oh, okay, I'll go kill him for you."
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can interpret this that makes sense to me. But like you said, lots of times it's explained better further on. So let's just continue and see what happens.
Okay. Thank you, John.
All right. Paragraph 5 then. Salvation is for the mind, and it is attained through peace. This is the only thing that can be saved and the only way to save it. Any response other than love arises from a confusion about the what and the how of salvation. And this is the only answer. Never lose sight of this, and never allow yourself to believe, even for an instant, that there is another answer. For you will surely place yourself among the poor, who do not understand that they dwell in abundance and that salvation has come. And I think that does clarify it. Salvation is of the mind, because the mind is the dwelling place of the Holy Spirit, where Spirit dwells. And it is attained through peace of mind, which is the result of love. And this is the only thing that can be saved and the only way to save it. The only thing that you can save is your mind. You can't save your body, because your body is just an ego illusion and it will pass away. But your mind is made of eternal spirit and is eternal and infinite. And so that's the only thing that can be saved. And through peace of mind is the only way to save it. So any response other than love arises from a confusion about the what and the how, and is the only answer.
I think that's much clearer.
Yes. So paragraph 6, to identify with the ego is to attack yourself and make yourself poor. That is why everyone who identifies with the ego feels deprived. What he experiences then is depression or anger, because what he did was to exchange self-love for self-hate, making him afraid of himself. He does not realize this. Even if he is fully aware of anxiety, he does not perceive its source as his own ego identification. And he always tries to handle it by making some sort of insane arrangement with the world. He always perceives this world as outside himself, for this is crucial to his adjustment. He does not realize that he makes this world, for there is no world outside of him. So people who are caught up in identifying with the ego, they don't realize that all of the pain and the suffering that is associated with that is the direct result of their identifying themselves with the ego instead of with spirit. When you think of yourself as a spiritual being and you deny the ego attachment, then we find salvation and we're not subject to the ego depravity. So when people perceive the world outside of ourselves, that's the problem. People don't realize that it is us, it is we have created the ego. This whole illusion of the three-dimensional world is a projection that we created ourselves. For there is no world outside of ourselves. It's a hard concept for a lot of people to wrap their minds around and to accept. And it's probably the biggest stumbling block that people encounter in this course of study, is the understanding that they are not their bodies, that the whole universe was created by us. It is an illusion. It's not real. And people can't have a very hard time wrapping their minds around it.
I agree.
And even when you have that concept, because we're still in the body, we still have to deal with all the ego stuff. But it's a lot easier to deal with it when you have the proper spiritual, mental outlook.
Yeah, it's not an easy task. I agree. And the stronger I feel for myself, the stronger I become as a spiritual being, it does get a little easier. But I guess I'm going to use the word easier, more fulfilling, I guess.
Yes. As I've said many times, you have to practice. It's the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. You just got to take it one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Paragraph 7. If only the loving thoughts of God's Son are the world's reality, the real world must be in his mind. His insane thoughts, too, must be in his mind. But an internal conflict of this magnitude he cannot tolerate. A split mind is endangered, and the recognition that it encompasses completely opposite thoughts within itself is intolerable. Therefore, the mind projects the split, not the reality. Everything you perceive as the outside world is merely your attempt to maintain your ego identification. For everyone believes that identification is salvation. Yet consider what has happened. For thoughts do have consequences to the thinker. You have become at odds with the world as you perceive it, because you think it is antagonistic to you. This is a necessary consequence of what you have done. You have projected outward what is antagonistic to what is inward, and therefore you would have to perceive it in this way. That is why you must realize that your hatred is in your mind and not outside it before you can get rid of it, and why you must get rid of it before you can perceive the world as it really is. Helen?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're unmuted. I thought you wanted
Oh,
to.
I see. I'm sorry.
So in a nutshell, what it's saying is that, it all happens in your mind. If everybody has a split mind to begin with, because the ego thoughts are in their mind. If they weren't, they would not be manifesting in bodies in the ego world. So that's a given. But we've been told that Holy Spirit indwells every mind because God placed Holy Spirit into our mind as a lifeline, as a biblical cord, so to speak, to Him, that would always keep us connected despite how far we fell into ego. So it's like the story of Adam and Eve, and they fell out of the garden, which means they split their mind and they fell into ego. And the whole thing about, Lucifer going to hell and there being a hell, that's just the ego and all of this. But the story starts out that everybody was created the Son of God to begin with, that we're all God's children, and so we're eternally tied to our Father, and no matter how far we have fallen, we all have a lifeline, a rope we can climb up to get out of the hell, to get out of the ego, and back into heaven. And that's what the Course is trying to teach us, is how to do that. Not only that we can do it, but is giving us the how to. And it all happens in our mind because that's where it all began in the first place. It's the mind that we split. We thought we could separate ourselves from God, which is what created the ego world in the first place, was that thought. So it all started in the mind. So that's why it says the loving thoughts are of God, and all the other thoughts that are not loving are of ego, are the cry for help, but they're all thoughts. And so we need to perceive this. We need to understand this. Sentence 10 says, That is why you must realize that your hatred is in your mind and not outside it before you can get rid of it. Paragraph 8. I said before that God so loved the world that he gave it to his only begotten Son. God does love the real world, and those who perceive its reality cannot see the world of death, for death is not of the real world, in which everything reflects the eternal. God gave you the real world in exchange for the one you made out of your split mind, and which is the symbol of death. For if you could really separate yourself from the mind of God, you would die. So again, this is another Bible interpretation, because we've been taught in the Bible that it says, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And it's been interpreted that God so loved the physical world, the universe, the ego universe, that he gave his Son Jesus to come here to save us. And yet we're being told here, no. He says, God so loved the world, he gave it to his only begotten Son. But that God only loves the real world, that the world they're talking to is the world of spirit, and that God so loves the world of spirit that he gave it to us, for we are his only begotten Son.
That's great, John. That clarifies so much. That makes so much sense to me.
Good. Paragraph 9. The world you perceive is a world of separation. Perhaps you are willing to accept even death to deny your Father. Yet he would not have it so. And so it is not so. You still cannot will against him. And that is why you have no control over the world you made. It is not a world of will, because it is governed by the desire to be unlike God. And this desire is not will. The world you made is therefore totally chaotic, governed by arbitrary and senseless laws, and without meaning of any kind. For it is made out of what you do not want, rejected from your mind because you are afraid of it. Yet this world is only in the mind of its maker, along with his real salvation. Do not believe it is outside of yourself, for only by recognizing where it is will you gain control over it. For you do not have control over your mind, since the mind is the mechanism of decision. So the ego world is a world of separation. To accept the ego world is to deny your Father, but your Father will not deny you. So you cannot will against him, because it is his will that you are his Son, everlasting, eternal, innocent, whole spirit. And that's how he wants it, and that's the way it is. but we're projecting this ego world from our own minds. And when we realize that, that's how we can stop it in our minds. We can stop the projection. We can embrace the spirit part of our minds and just let the ego mind go. It just disappears. If you don't pay any attention to it, it just dissipates, it evaporates, it goes on its own. You don't have to fight it. And it's our decision. We have free will. So paragraph 10, if you will recognize that all the attack you perceive is in your own mind and nowhere else, you will at least have placed its source, and where it begins, it must end. For in this same place also lies salvation. The altar of God where Christ abideth is there. You have defiled the altar, but not the world. Yet Christ has placed the atonement on the altar for you. Bring your perceptions of the world to this altar, for it is the altar to truth. There you will see your vision changed, and there you will learn to see truly. For this place where God and his Son dwell in peace, and where you are welcome, you will look out in peace and behold the world truly. Yet to find the place, you must relinquish your investment in the world as you project it, allowing the Holy Spirit to extend the real world to you from the altar of God.
That was a complete circle, huh?
Yes. Any questions, comments?
I think this was very interesting.
Well, it's certainly something to meditate upon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just, gaining that understanding that the whole thing is in our minds, and we can choose how to think. And if we decide to think with spirit as much as possible, then that's really all we need to do, because in doing that, if you only think with spirit, then you're never thinking with ego, then the ego world just disappears, and then you're always in spirit. And so even if you are still walking around in the body, and that's what Jesus did. That was his testimony to the world, because he was walking around in the ego body, and yet his mind was 100% in spirit. And so he could recognize the ego world for what it was. It's kind of like in today, they have those heads, those game sets thing where virtual reality, where you make yourself the warrior. You're playing the game, and you're inhabiting this other virtual reality in this virtual world, and you're going through the whole game. And it's like, that's actually what living in the ego world is like. It's this illusion. It's this virtual reality. But when you're playing this game, in your mind that you're not really that character that's in the game, that you're just assuming that character for the game. Well, that's the reality of ourselves. We're these spiritual beings, and we've enveloped this ego reality to play this game here on planet Earth that is just a projection from our own mind. It's a hologram of virtual reality. And to get back to where we do belong is just a matter of shutting the game off and taking the headset off and saying, okay, I've played this game long enough. I'm not going to play anymore.
But it could be used as a tool also if one can be to step back, if you will, and then be objective is how I'm going to say it, with no emotion triggered or no, no and just no emotion triggered, just to see the a different perception. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And Jesus exampled this. They brought him before Pontius Pilate, and he was completely neutral. He didn't try to defend himself.
Yeah.
He didn't get angry. He didn't act out of ego at all. You know, they nailed him to the cross, and he said, "Well, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." But you know, he knew that they could only kill his ego body, and that was just an illusion anyway.
And so as you were talking about it, John, I had a vision of Jesus, looking out at ego, and it's like going down a tunnel, and just he must have been able to see that. I'm talking in human terms, and see that instantaneously, that person for who they are, for for those the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when Jesus looked at them, all that he saw was spiritual beings. He looked past their ego selves. That's what we need to do. That's exactly what we need to do.
Yes.
Everybody that we come in contact with, we need to look past the ego body and look within them and recognize them as spiritual beings. That's the whole key to the transformation.
It's a lot of work.
Well, not really. It's, once you have that concept in your mind and you start practicing it, it just becomes second nature. It's not work at all. You don't have to force yourself to see somebody as a spiritual being. You just accept that. You look in the mirror, you see a spiritual being. You look out on the street, and no matter who's walking by, it's a spiritual being. You just see everybody as one.
But there's still attachments within me sometimes that become triggered. And so I'm trying to release that. I'm trying to, I thought I was in a good point for a while, but just releasing that and looking at other people as spiritual beings is the goal, but it's just I don't know. Sometimes I still get caught up in ego.
Well, just meditate on it.
Okay.
Go and reread this section and reflect upon it. And again, it's like, it's like anything else. You have to practice your spiritual self, your and take it one day at a time.
I think I will.
But Jesus is proof that it can be done, is the thing. That's what he came to demonstrate to us, that yes, this can be done. And after 2,000 years, knowing that, his words had been misinterpreted and misunderstood and what have you, he came back to give us the Course. And he's using the Course as a vehicle to help explain some of these things in the Bible. We had two good ones in this section about give to the poor and follow me in the beginning, and that about the Father saying that he so loved the world that he gave it to his Son, which is us. So all we can do is do the best that we can. And the thing about it is this, put it in perspective. Spirit is eternal. Time is an illusion.
Yeah.
So, is it going to take a long time? What's a long time in the ego world is nothingness to spirit. Spirit is eternal, and there is no time in spirit in any which way. So you take what time you need to learn these lessons and to evolve. It's okay. You don't have to beat yourself up. You don't have to get frustrated with it. You don't have to, be overly concerned if you make a mistake or you lapse into ego now and again, because you are evolving, you are learning, you are getting there, and it'll take whatever time it takes. Don't worry, be happy.
Good advice, Sean.
All righty then. Let's say goodnight for now and have a moment of silence, and then we'll stop our recording.